I feel like we were talking about the one brain cell. I feel like my one brain cell was like meatery, Meatery. I was like, wait, no, that's not right.
That's why every time now I have to say meadery, I make honey wine because people are always like, "Isn't that called a butcher?" Like, no, it's not meat. It's alcohol. It's honey. The oldest alcohol in the world people don't know about anymore.
Hey guys, welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair, a global Witcher podcast. My name is Alyssa from GoodMorhen, and I'll be your host as I enter international Hanza, accompany Geralt of Rivia, and his destiny, Cirilla of Cintra, across the continent. We are currently on our way to Vienna. Sorry about the audio quality for this voiceover, but I'm so excited to see so many of you for Hanstria 2023. Thanks as always to our podcast patrons over on Patreon and our producer level patrons, Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob B, Haven of the Edge of the World, Charlotte from Edinburgh Glamorai, The Original Roach, Cottinger's Cat, Libby, John of Roblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, James Carson III, Miriam of Temeria, and Softy. As for this episode, Nicola from Italy and Ruark from the US call in for Andrzej Sapkowski's Time of Contempt Chapter 4. Join us as we discuss using action to tell a story, the reasons behind an act of mercy, the role of prophecy in The Witcher, and Geralt's Himbo origin story. Without further ado, let's get to our discussion of Time of Contempt Chapter 4.
Hey guys, welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair. My name is Alyssa, and today we're welcoming two members of our Hanza to the show. My first guest is from Verona, northern Italy, where they're currently pursuing a PhD in neuroscience. Their interests include books, documentaries, biology, science, history, and more. My second guest is currently in Boise, Idaho, and can often be found in nature with their dogs or making mead and food. Please welcome Nicola from Italy and Ruark from the US. Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
Hi, fine.
Lovely. I'm so excited to have you both here. Both of you are first-time guests on the show. And as is tradition, I've got to ask, how did you both get into the Witcher series?
It was one friend of mine that introduced me to The Witcher 3, actually. And I started with The Witcher 2 and then progressed to Witcher 3 and read all the book. I devoured them. And then I ended up here.
What about you, Ruark?
It's kind of funny that I didn't find it through the games because I've play a lot of fantasy games, but I think it came out right when I was in the beginning of college. I wasn't playing a lot of video games. So I actually found it through the books. I just over the last couple of years been getting back into reading a lot of fantasy. So I've just been constantly hunting for fantasy books, and oddly enough The Witcher does not come up enough on lists of top fantasy books, and it's just it hurts because once I found it I just fell in love with the books. So I've read them and I've listened to Peter Kenny's version twice through now, and I just am super obsessed. And then obviously I started watching the show. I haven't watched season 3 yet, but I've watched the first 2 seasons.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. I know that you both mentioned you're fans of fantasy. Are there any other book series that you guys would recommend to listeners?
So many. I mean, the biggest one that also gets overlooked is if you like fantasy and also like D&D, definitely read the Legend of Drizzt series. They're all fantastic, and it's another thing that never ever comes up on a fantasy list, but they're just really good. And of course, I love The Hobbit and Patrick Rothfuss's Name of the Wind. They're all really good recommendations.
Yeah, I don't found one recently, but I don't remember the name. It's set in the medieval England with all the mythological parts, so the different mythology of England that interact. So it's very similar to The Witcher. I need to refine the name, especially in English, because I don't remember it in English.
Yeah.
But it's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely post it in Discord.
Yeah, I posted it definitely.
I'd be interested for sure.
Today we'll continue our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Time of Contempt, Chapter 4, in which politics and deceit wreak havoc on the Mages' Conclave, spelling disaster for the continent. Meanwhile, Cahir and Fen are killed. Here's a quick synopsis of the chapter from future Alyssa.
In Chapter 4, Ciri wakes in a chamber in Loxia Palace after a string of prophetic dreams. Cahir and Fen piece together that someone is looking for Ciri due to prophecies about her child. Cahir, as it turns out, thinks little of Geralt and, with his newfound knowledge of the child of the Elder Blood, wants to capture the girl for his own gain. A tall half-elf kills Cahir, and this trio of thugs burn Fen in their office after finding information about Ciri. Finally, Ciri dreams about Yennefer guiding her through a series of doors. Geralt wakes in the morning after the Mages' Banquet and finds himself in the middle of a coup. Redania and the Northern Sorcerers are rounding up traitors to Nilfgaard. Dijkstra takes Geralt as a temporary prisoner, but on the Redanians' way to Loxia, Geralt brawls with them and escapes. Dijkstra asks Geralt to hand Ciri over to Redania. Geralt searches for the way to Garstang, continually searching for Yennefer. Along the way, the sorcerers tell him that the war has already begun. Yennefer had brought Ciri before the mages, and in a trance, she announced the start of the war. The King of Redania was assassinated, and Aedirn prematurely launched an attack on Nilfgaard due to Applegat's failure to deliver his final message. Tissaia neutralized the magical protections in Garstang, causing a battle to rage amongst the sorcerers, made even more chaotic by the unexpected arrival of Scoia'tael supporting Nilfgaard. Ciri wakes from her trance in the midst of the chaos. Yennefer and Geralt send her to safety alone, but she quickly encounters Scoia'tael, dangerous sorcerers, and the Black Knight from Cintra. She battles the elves and injures the knight, but ultimately chooses not to kill him. Geralt follows her to the Tower of the Gulls, but is intercepted by Vilgefortz. He's defeated by the mage and severely wounded. Vilgefortz follows the girl into the tower, but Ciri escapes through the unstable magical portal. Triss recovers the injured Witcher, begging Tissaia for help to teleport him to safety. The chapter ends with her promising that she will.
So now that we've gotten a quick synopsis on the chapter itself, I'd love to hear both of your overall thoughts on Chapter 4. Obviously, the Thanid coup is one of the biggest events in the Witcher series. What are your overall thoughts?
Just first off, like you said, it's just like one of the biggest events in the whole entire series. I mean, it's like the launch pad for like everything. I was super excited when I got Chapter 4 because it's like so much stuff happens just from the way it starts to like the progression through. Like you get really like the why everyone's doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I am really looking forward to just like analyzing like Geralt's himbo attitude toward handling everything.
Yeah, I'm going to dig into that too. But Nicola, what about your overall thoughts?
Yeah, it's really a pivot point because from up to that point, it's pretty contained in the sort of family and Lars and the overall adventure. And from that point, it explodes, it distances the core trio, but it's very an increase in the dimension and the complexity of the overall politic of the continent. Yeah, so it's very interesting, and I think that the first time that I read it, I didn't expect that. So I was quite blind on the overall history. So it took me a bit of surprise. I was quite shocked. So it's very good.
Yeah, it's the Witcher's Red Wedding. Let me rephrase. It's one of the Witcher's Red Weddings, and it's an event that really comes out of nowhere and changes not just the course of the book, but the course of the series as a whole. It's the inciting event for changing the continent at large, as well as the separation of our main characters. The way that it's written is so unusual, I think, in my opinion. You guys might have different opinions based on deeper knowledge of like fantasy and other works. But the way that Sapkowski writes this chapter is quite unexpected, I think, for such a large event. And I'm excited to dig into that a little bit more with you both. Were there any particular highlights or lowlights that stood out to you in this chapter?
I mean, scruples.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Such a good quote. I was going to call that out as well. This is kind of a little bit into the chapter after we switch points of view from Ciri to Geralt. And the quote here is, "Had it not been for the foolish scruples of the Witcher and his impractical principles, many subsequent events would have run their course quite differently. Many events would probably have not taken place at all, and the history of the world would have unfolded in a different way. But the history of the world unfolded as it unfolded, the sole cause of which was that the Witcher had scruples." And I know I talk a lot on the podcast about Geralt being kind of an idiot, and I always circle back around to like this specific quote, which makes me so excited to talk about it. Our characters are extraordinary. You know, they are a witcher, a sorceress, and the chosen one, right? But the decisions of like destiny and their own free will comes down to sometimes just silliness and idiocy. And I love that for Geralt. And I love how unflinching Sapkowski is about throwing him under the bus.
The reason I like The Witcher so much is for like, well, there's a lot of reasons, right? But like two of the main reasons come up in this like chapter, and that's like a lot of fantasy is like the plot and then how the characters react to the plot. But the way like Andrzej writes this, it's very much like the characters are like the characters, and like it's like just a different lens, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people, like Game of Thrones, like it's all the crap that happens, you know. Lord of the Rings, it's like what's happening in the world, and like our viewpoint is very much just like how Geralt and Ciri react to all the crap that's happening. And I just like I like that lens a lot better, because sometimes you just get like lost in the sauce of like this person and that person and this and why and how, and so like I appreciate that it's like a much more narrow lens.
Yeah,
and this narrow lens applies very perfectly to this chapter, because in a lot of books it will be read will be written like a summary of everything that happens as a bird eye, let's say, while we are thrown in the middle of the action, not knowing what is happening. So we are confused as the character. So it's very gives out the confusion that should be in a chaotic coup event, let's say.
We actually talk about this heavily in the next episode in chapter 5.
Okay.
But that's one of the things that I really admire about Sapkowski's writing, and how he leverages points of view to make events like this much more personal and much more humanized. Because we can talk at length about like military action and a coup and all of that. But when we actually think about, you know, the human consequence of it and the human perspective of it, and really bring it down to a ground level, for me personally, that's where the interest lies. And yeah, so I love that we get moments like this. One of my other favorite quotes from The Witcher in general is actually from this chapter, and Codringer is talking to Fen in Ciri's dream. And he mentions, do you know when stories stop being stories? The moment when someone begins to believe in them. And it's just a quote that I like. I might have put it on GoodMorhen many years ago, but it's one of those standout quotes that Kindle actually highlights as like many people like this quote. And I do too. It's a good one. Any other scenes that stood out to you in this chapter?
Well, there are two scenes that I think that they are very hilarious in a very serious moment. So you are dread to know what is happening, and you find out the Geralt being a dumbass. So reacting to Dandelion giving the two swords. So you're saying only one is mine. And the other one that I think that I read it every time I read, I laugh. It's when I think Kira says, "Are you looking for trouble?" "No, I'm looking for Yennefer." I think every time I laugh at that stupid moment, and I imagine it with a serious voice, so a serious look. So it's very counterpoint. So it's very serious scene situation, and there is a stupid quote that makes me laugh.
I mean, Andrzej does such a good job of like making sure that you're like plugged into like all the emotional nuances of everything. Like every serious moment has either something like funny or outrageous with it. Every like sad moment has like, he does such a good job balancing it, so you never like devastated or never like, you know what I mean? You're always like, there's the other one there to like be like, yeah, okay, we're
Yeah.
we're okay, keep going.
Yeah, I think even that scene with Kira, that section opens, and I think it says like halfway up the stairs, Kira Metz fell on his head. And
Exactly.
it's a very comical way to talk about obviously a wildly grave and dangerous situation and circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, she was
Um,
tossed out a window magically.
yeah,
She fell on his head. It's like, well,
yeah.
kinda.
It's very good. I think the one scene that feels incredibly somber is Cahir's. So
Yep.
Cahir is a
Yeah.
character that we haven't really gotten to explore at this point in the books. However, you know, we're introduced to Ciri and Geralt through Cahir, in his first time encountering the Witcher and the Switcher girl. And this is another scene that stands out to me because you know, it's Ciri defending herself against Scoia'tael, and then he sees Geralt, you know, launch himself out the window, drop in a position that would break another man's knees, and then just start killing. And there's a quote from Cahir, or from Cahir's third-person narrator, like
Yeah.
that said, like the girl that she was fighting was insane, but the man, he was cool and he was collected. It's such a obviously interesting contrast when you're looking at, from an outside perspective, at our main characters and how Ciri's training is probably, you know, still a lot of effort. And she's fighting obviously in self-defense, whereas Geralt has many, many years of instinctual fighting, many years of killing monsters and men, and he is still defending his ward, and that is his primary purpose as her guardian. And so seeing that, though, through Cahir's eyes is wild. And I don't remember there being any particularly funny moments for him in that, but yeah, a memorable scene.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the other things I really like about Sapkowski is a lot of times, and Sapkowski's guilty too, because everyone's guilty, but like action's just for action's sake, right?
Mhm.
But I think Andrzej does a lot of good work about making sure that like action is telling a story, right?
Mhm.
And really tells you a lot about like where the characters are at, like mentally. Like as someone that's taken a lot of like martial arts in my past,
Hmm.
you can like tell a lot about a person based on like how they fight, when they fight, why they fight. You know, there's just like a
Yeah.
lot that kind of goes into it. And so like the quote that you're talking about is so poignant because it's like you read it as like really it's like metaphor. Like he compares her to like a cat, right? Being like graceful and nimble, but also ferocious, like defending, right? Versus like Geralt is just like this fiend, right? This like tiger that's just like, I'm here to rip you apart, right? And that line is like tells you a lot about not only Geralt's like training, but also where he's at mentally, right? Like right now, he's just like task, goal, execute. Like that's all that matters, right?
It's the only time he's ever like that.
Right. And
Every other time.
yeah, he's like conflict. And this time there's like no conflict, you know what I mean? And but like Ciri is still dealing with a lot of like now she has some training and she has some
Sure.
experience, but she's still dealing with a lot of that. But it shows like that progression. Like in Kaer Morhen, she's still kind of like sloppy, right? Now she's starting to like hone those skills, but there's still a lot of that like emotional turmoil kind of guiding what she does. And as it progresses, not to give like spoilers away, but like she's real different at the end.
Yeah.
And it just I think he understands people so well to be able to write those nuances in without like I don't know that he has like a lot of experience like fighting, but like he knows
Mhm.
people and knows how to tell a story, and he just does such a good job. And I think that happens if you kind of look for that throughout the whole entire series, whether it's like Cahir fighting or whether it's like some of our other characters we'll meet later on. Like you get to know a lot about them as a person just by like watching how they fight.
You mentioned the city and its growth. We can see in this scene, we can see the trauma that still haunts her. She is ferocious like a cat, but he is panicking. So it's a tunnel vision on the winged helmet. So once it's destroyed, okay, no problem. The trauma is sort of past. It's not
Yeah.
that easy in usually in life, but it's a fight or flight situation. So it's confronted with her biggest fear. So it's instinctual and surviving attack, while Geralt is, as we said, calm. So it's distancing himself from the action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point to bring up about Ciri, because as we saw from her dreams at the beginning of Blood of Elves, the dream that Geralt has earlier in Time of Contempt as well, the idea and the silhouette of the Black Knight with the bird of prey helmet is such an abstracted nightmare that when she finally breaks the helmet down and it comes off and we see Cahir's face, he's concrete, he's real. It's no longer this fear. It's like what Vesemir says, right, in Blood of Elves. Like, the more you know about something, the less scary it is. Anything that has caused her fear and caused her pain, that has been embedded in this image, is suddenly shattered when she sees that there's a real person there, and she doesn't necessarily have the will or drive to kill him, particularly once he has a face associated with him. He's suddenly like a real person.
It's a humanization. Psychologically, it's different to act on another human if you consider it as a human or as an animal, as a person. While if you distance yourself from that person and you consider it a number or a monster, in this case a ghost or whatnot, you are distancing yourself, so you are able to attack also a person. But once she sees that is a human, so it's a normal guy, and she doesn't recognize it, she's not able to kill it. So it's a very different approach to attack a faceless guy or attack a person that he's looking at you. The fact that there are the wings, both compares in her dreams and haunts them, but also there are a few times in this chapter that Sapkowski talks about the sound that these wings does, and it's possible that it's not her imagination to hear this haunting whistle, but probably would have been a very chaotic whistle from the feathers. So it could be also another haunting images to be chased by a whistling black knight. Very traumatic.
I also think it's very poignant that she like defeats him and then turns to ride away, and like we switch to his perspective. So like, not only is he humanized for the character's viewpoint, but like us as readers, all of a sudden we go into his eyes. And I think that's like, it's just so interesting and so well done, where you're like, she humanizes him and then you're humanizing him, and then all of a sudden you're just watching Geralt come at you like as the reader, and you're like, oh crap.
I know. And it's really fascinating to be kind of on that end of Geralt as well. And again, hard to say when you have that scene where Cahir is just like pleading for his life, and he's just like, I'm sorry, please don't kill me. And Geralt's like, why the fuck not? And Cahir is just like, I saved her in Cintra. And then he shuts his eyes, and then he opens them and Geralt's gone. Ooh. It makes you curious, though, because we're not with Geralt at that moment. What was he thinking? Why did he choose to spare his life? Is it because he just simply didn't have time? Like, this dude is clearly incapable of fighting me anymore. Let me go get Ciri. Or was he genuinely being merciful?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually what I was going to ask both of you. I was interested to see what do you think was his reason? And also the way it's like described, like when we get his viewpoint, like he's seeing her run away and he sees them kind of come up, and then it cuts to her and then it cuts to him, right? So it's like, how much did he see? Because he obviously was trying to get to her as fast as possible, right? And so like, I'm interested if he like saw that whole fight as he was trying to work toward her, or if he just came in at the end, because I think that would color the like why, right? Because I think if he watched her defeat him, now he's just like dealing with consequence, versus if he came in just seeing him injured and her riding away, like that's like a different decision process. So like, I'm curious, what do you guys think was his reason for letting it go?
In my opinion, I think about it a lot. because it always seems a bit strange to me. But I come to realize that in my opinion at least, it's a conscious decision, so it's merciful because when Geralt gives his sword to Ciri, it says if you use it, you might have to kill it. So when he see that he used the sword but didn't kill it, it probably okay, she decided you have to leave, so it's not my right to choose for her. So it's possibly unmerciful, probably regretful. I don't think that he's like okay, you're a good man, go away.
Yeah.
But it's more reluctant merciful. So I don't think that is a matter of time, like I have to go find her because we just saw that he killing like 5 people in 5 minutes, so it's not a problem for him swing his sword and cutting off. So I think it's more merciful.
I don't think Geralt in this chapter is particularly like blood hungry at the moment. Like earlier in the chapter, I don't think he killed any of Dijkstra's men, any of the Redanians, when he was kind of fighting his way out. I think it mentions like he knocked one against like a gargoyle, he smashed another, but I don't think he like actually killed any of them. The Scoia'tael are probably a different case altogether, because they were actively, attacking him to kill. Whereas Cahir, I feel like he's clearly out. He's clearly sidelined. So I wonder if it's just one of those things where if he doesn't have to kill people right now, he's not really keen on it. So that could be another cause for mercy.
Yeah, I mean, I can see both sides. For me, I think it like really depends on how much he saw. But he was like, I don't know why she let you go. I want to know why you think I should let you go, right? I think he could have potentially answered poorly, and then Geralt would have just finished it and kept going. But like, I think Geralt wanted Cahir to understand that she could have killed him.
Yeah.
Right. And didn't, and wanted Cahir to think about maybe why.
You've been bad. Think about your actions. Think about your choices.
Exactly.
And just
Geralt
lay
comes
here.
across as dumb sometimes, but I think sometimes he's intuitive.
Sure.
So I think he wanted Cahir to be like,
be time out for a little bit until someone comes and gets you. Have a think about what you've done. And as we go on with our discussion, there's so much that happens in this chapter, as we said. And one of the things that culminates in this chapter is kind of the consequence of prophecy. When we hear from Kirametz that Ciri has been brought into the council and then suddenly started prophesizing, and that was really the event that set off all the mages and all the sorcerers, and caused the whole thing to immediately blow open. We've been building up our own knowledge of Ciri's powers as readers. We saw a little bit of this when she was in Kaer Morhen in Blood of Elves, when she was kind of rattling off prophecies when they kept feeding her magic mushrooms. And then we saw this with Applegat, chapter 2 with Fabio Sachs, and then now here in chapter 4, we get, a very large and real consequence for her abilities. And what would you guys say is the role of prophecy, both canonically within the series as well as for readers in this chapter?
The prophecies are always very tricky because both for a reader and a writer, it's very tricky because I get disappointed when you read a prophecy and you naturally understand everything. Oh yeah, it's the chosen one, so it will do everything. It will go all right. Here are more opaque as should be, and there is also the possibility of the self-fulfilling prophecies. So there are many prophecies also around throughout the book that are practically self-fulfilling. So once you know them, the action that you will take to prevent them or to obtain them will lead to the prophesied effect. So it's very interesting, the use of prophecies in Sapkowski's works. in this case, it's a bit, especially when he talks about the happening around the continent. It's a bit of both for us readers and for the all the mages, sort of checklist of everything that is happening. Breakout news. Vizimir is dead. Know that, and so it's also very useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's so interesting because he uses it for his like own sake as a writer as much as he uses it as a storytelling device for the reader and for like the character development. He's just like, I'm gonna use this trope to fix a lot of things, right? And so he's just like, let me tell all the news, let me to do foreshadowing, but also let me tell you how to fight it. Let me do all of these things with this one. And I also feel like he uses it brilliantly and like with more frequency. I feel like if you do it, so many people like there's like this one prophecy you have to deal with over a whole entire like book series, right? Mm-hmm. He's like, no, she says random crap all the time. And it's pretty much all true, but like sometimes it's vague and sometimes it's just like Vesemir died. Like that's just a fact. Like it's just, I don't know. I think it's another moment where you're like, I need to know this information, but like I don't want to be drowned in exposition.
Sure.
So like here's a moment where like Ciri's just gonna rattle off a bunch of stuff. Cool, I'm caught up. Let's keep going. You know.
I imagine like Andrzej in his studios, thinking how I can explain to all the mages and my audience all that is happening. A prophecy. Let's write it. Yeah. So.
Exactly.
I know Ciri is wired into like Elon Musk satellites. She knows what's going on all over the world. I thought that this was like a really great thing to call out in your notes, Ruark. Like the role of prophecy in canon is obviously like it's something incredibly rare. Not a lot of people are capable of being a medium or have those abilities in general. I think Ciri mentions to Fabio, she's just like, you can't like mock prophecy because only like one out of like a bajillion mages has it. And then she's not totally aware that she herself has those abilities because they come to her in dreams. She says them out loud and then she has no recollection of what has happened. But it's interesting to see that, again, her abilities give us context around the world. We know what's going to happen to Applegate because she has told us. Same thing with Fabio Sachs. Even though she doesn't really understand it, we as readers are just like, oh, that's cool. He's going to die a world away from his family. Great. Good for you, Fabio. But as you both have said, like it's has so much reverence within the context of the world. Like the mages take it incredibly seriously, as we see, because it causes Thanid. But for the reader, it's a nice way for, as you both said, for us to get all of the information that we possibly need. We understand what's happening because Ciri serves as kind of a framing narrative for example, Codringer and Fenn's death. He could cut away with it. Like there's really no need for Ciri to experience that, except for just add to drama and add to tension and suspense. Like her premonition and her abilities allow her to offer things like, don't do that, death stands behind the door. And we're like, oh, fuck. And then we have to read about like, oh no, what's going to be in the door? What's going to be behind the door? So for even that brief moment, like it just adds a little bit. It colors our experience as a reader because we're following along with Ciri rather than as an impartial reader.
Yeah. I think also it can it's interesting because in this moment in particular, it actually is like causing a like third rift, right? Because you have the like mages that are on Nilfgaard's side and then the mages that are with the kings. But you also have like Tissaia is really trying to be like, well, screw both of them. Like mages should be in charge, right? And you have Geralt who's just trying to be like, I don't want a part of this, right? Like it shows you like two sides of not being involved, right? It's like, do I not want to be involved at all? Or do I like think that my third option is better, Tissaia, right? And like Ciri is really helping like show that, right? It's like you're both kind of wrong. Like Nilfgaard's wrong, these kings are wrong, and like, but she is not aware of it. Just like Tissaia and Yennefer is like aware of this like third hole that is being created.
Mm-hmm. We've started to speak about this at length, but this chapter is so interesting from like a storytelling perspective. The way that Sapkowski writes such a huge event on the continent and is unique, at least in my opinion, with my experience in fantasy. You guys might have other series that you can make comparisons to, but how would you say Sapkowski's writing and storytelling decisions in this chapter support the plot and this major event in the series?
I think like we talked about a little bit already. I think closing your like lens a little bit is like helpful to not get like drowned in like, I mean, that's why some fantasy books are like, it's like 18 books long and like they get good after book 5. Like I have such a pet peeve with a couple series that I won't name because I don't want to be added too many times. Right? Like if you have to tell me gotta get through book 6 before it gets good, it's probably not good. Right? But like in the Witcher, because he like closes your lens, things kind of like move a little bit more rapidly. But just because that lens is closed doesn't mean he can't give you multiple of them, right?
Sure.
And so like I think this moving target in this chapter keeps everything like moving, but also keeps it like intriguing to the point where it just never happens so seamlessly in a lot of fantasy books, right? Mm-hmm. Like they'll do like a foreshadow or they'll do like a bounce back or they'll switch lenses, but like a lot of times it feels kind of jarring, you know? But this time I don't know how he doesn't, you know, just like the way it reads, you just like keep reading and all of a sudden the chapter's over and you're like, oh.
And another thing is that, as we said before, the scruples of Geralt, as well as the fight with Vilgefortz,
Mm-hmm.
that he says that a few weeks later he will recollect what was his mistake, and I think that it's the only thing only time that I read. So in the Witcher books are the only one that I read that has these changing in time that are so compelling, because you should be spoiled of the action. So you should start with okay, I already know what is happening. I'm not interested. And instead, in this case, it's the contrary. So you know how it end up, and you are very interested in understanding how it's possible.
Yeah.
So it's very particular.
I find the perspective really interesting in this chapter. Of course, we start off with Ciri and her dreams. We hear about Codringer and Fen's demise, and then for the majority of the chapter, not everything, we have the separation with Cahir, for example. But for a lot of the chapter, we're with Geralt as he's experiencing these things in real time. The interesting choice that makes is that we're hearing about a lot of things that happen from first-person accounts. So, for example, when Ciri falls out of the tower and she's like, "Oh no, Geralt, this is what happened. Yennefer brought this little medium into the thing," and we get like a small cutaway, you know, to some of the stuff that happened. But for the most part, Geralt's hearing about this. So it divorces us as readers from the action, even though we, you know, see snippets of it. But it's such a unique choice to have us be with Geralt. Like, why are we experiencing this massive magic event from a, you know, unmagical by comparison, and uninvolved character? So it's just an interesting choice to make, and possibly it's because we as readers are unmagical and, you know, uninvolved, or it's just Sapkowski finding the funniest possible perspective for this major political event. The flash forward, as you mentioned, to the fight with Vilgefortz, again, such an interesting line because it gives us the outcome before we actually see the effect. And it's such a shocking scene because generally we see Geralt being competent, uninjured, and he's really met a match, and he comes out of this startled I think the way that scene opens is, when he thought about it weeks later, he didn't make any mistakes. The only mistake he made was not leaving before the fight began. That's wild to hear from a character that we have spent 4 books with, who has conquered almost everything that has been thrown his way, with the exception of getting stuck in the Temple of Mobility for a hot second to recover during the events of The Last Wish. But, for the most part, he's pretty handy with his sword, confident, capable, and that completely falls apart in that fight with Vilgefortz. And we see his probably guilt, regret, and sense of loss in just that one sentence alone.
And the losing of this fight, it's reiterated because it's the 3rd fight in this chapter, and in the other one he was always underrated. So first with the Redanians, it's alone without any weapons, and the other one has weapons. Against the Scoia'taels, he's alone against 5 other elf. So it's always difficult for him, and he'd make it look easier. So he cut it off. 5 person as nothing, and then against simply 1 person that you think like, okay, it will be easy enough. It's pummeled to near death. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like flashing lights, like, hey, this is the bad guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you're like all these other people are like obviously of big significance. You got all these mages and you got all these kings and all this like push and pull, and you get all this yanking, and then all of a sudden there's just like this guy that's kind of been like around. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, he's just another powerful, arrogant mage king. And just like add him to the list, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh. This is real bad news.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly establishes Vilgefortz as a big bad of this series, or at least, for now.
Yeah.
We haven't really seen Geralt be outmatched. Not so much and not so poorly. And at the end of the chapter, we have Triss Marigold's desperation to get him out. And she's just like, I hope you're not dead, Jesus Christ, to say a help. And we've never seen him quite like this. And then the comeuppance of, he broke Dijkstra's leg in the beginning and his femur is shattered at the end. We know Geralt is resilient, and this is shocking, I think, as a reader. So really, really major fight scene, and a memorable one as well. It's written really well. The way that it happens very quickly in the book, but you're kind of hearing about how Geralt is off step for the entirety of the fight, and it's a really, really compelling piece of the chapter to read or to listen to.
And I think that it feels so fast also because the other fight scene are very descriptive. So, for example, also with the Redanians, he described every blow, every movement, every levers that he used, every dialogue that he spoken. While against Vilgefortz, it appeared like he parries a bit, he gets stuck, he's pummeled to death. So it's very, very fast and very counterintuitive. It's also the opposite of what many other writers would have done, because usually with your big bad you try to get away like 5 pages of fighting to describe how good it is, while here it's like in a paragraph you say he breaks his bone, okay. So it's very, very fast.
And I think it's also one of those things where it probably reflects Geralt's state of mind as well. He's lucid and capable during his fight with the Redanians, the fight with Scoia'tael, but he's recounting the fight with Vilgefortz after the fact, and it happened so quickly he can't remember all of the details. He was injured at the beginning of the fight. He was passed out by the end. I think it does a really nice job of actually being parallel to his mental state through those fight scenes as well.
Yeah, I think he very quickly is like panicked because I like, as we talked about, like right now his goal is Ciri.
Mhm.
And then like I think after the first like parry, he's like immediately already knows like I lost.
Yeah.
Like again, as someone that's done martial arts, sometimes like before it even starts, you're like, this is not going to go well for me, right? But you stand your ground
Yeah.
anyway, right? Like Geralt's still like, I'm going to do this, but like I think at the very beginning he's like, crap, and he's thinking about Ciri, and the moment you like aren't in it 100%, it's going to go even worse, and it does. Like it just so quickly goes from like he parries once and it's like that was way too strong. Like I'm supposed to be superhuman. Why did that not work? Right? And then it just like it just goes bad.
Yeah. And I think as we're kind of seeing fragments of his memory at the end of the chapter, um, Peter Kenny does an incredible job of acting this out too between Triss and Geralt and Tissaia as he's fading. But on the subject, Nicola, you had a note about like what the writing actually conveys while we're going through all these points of view.
As we said, the point of view is very narrow on the character. So, for example, as we said, Geralt is completely lost. So it's focused on other thing, or it's started to being not as efficient as usually. So it's very comparing to read, and you are emotionally attached. So you enter in his mind, and the point of view becomes your point of view, and you are feeling his emotion, and the changing of point of view. As we said before, it places you completely in another person, and you feel like the other person, as before with Cahir, that you've passed between one point of view to another to the next one, and you feel all of them. So it's a very strange method of writing that very connects you to every character, not just the main one. Usually you are connected to the main one, and maybe his friends, for example, but the other one it's not important. While here you are emotionally connected with everyone. It's like you are playing a game with every single character. So you are this every single character. It's very mind blowing to realize that you are connected to both parts. So you are connected with the good guys and the bad guys, or what appears as a bit bad guys. So it's very interesting as a writing, as a reading in particular.
It kind of reminds me of like a D&D, a DM's worst nightmare in D&D, where like it's about the players, right? And it's like, no, the players are now going to fall in love with every single NPC that's ever existed, and they have to just keep them alive.
Listen, we're guilty of it, but we don't mind.
Yeah, exactly. And the DM's just like, oh, it's just supposed to be a throwaway character, right? But like Andrzej does the opposite. He's like, I'm going to make you care about every human being in this world.
Yeah, just like Applegat. You think like, okay, it's a random character. Hi, bye, see you later. And you are like a few pages back when you read his death. You're like, poor soul. Why?
Yeah, I'm going to think about Applegat for the rest of my goddamn life.
I know, right?
Me and my friends, like, Okit, I don't know how it's, Essidavan.
Yes. Oh, goodness,
And
yeah.
we cry every time. We tease each other to make us cry, because it's pointless, his death, and it's so sad. And
Yep.
so it's a similar thing. It's just a character that you see only once, and it could be like, just don't say anything, and I think that she will live forever happy. And no, it has to end bad, and you feel bad about that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. The plot points that he just like leaves open-ended because who cares? Because the plot's about the characters. But then there's the plot points that was just like, No, but this one, I'm gonna make sure ends.
Let me just
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
twist the knife a little more. Like you could have let us have a happy ending
Yeah.
with S.U. David. You could have let us have a happy ending with somebody else, and yet
Yeah, it's so interesting where he chooses it. You know what I mean? It's just like some books want you to be sad, so they purposely kill off an important character, and he doesn't like do that as much. You know what I mean? He's like, this rando, that one is gonna make you feel something.
Yeah, you like this character? It's ending good. It's everyone happy. Don't be happy. It will die. Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
It's so interesting because I think I've said this on either one of the podcast episodes before this or the one after this, and I have no recollection. But I'm pretty sure Sapkowski would disagree that the characters are the primary point of The Witcher, but rather the plot is, and that the characters support the plot. This is a case where I would disagree with the author, and I feel like the characters are the story, and they exemplify everything that we, of course, love about The Witcher, but it feels uniquely driven by the characters as opposed to some other fantasy worlds where, as you said, Ruark, like things happen to the characters. They feel very present and very actionable, particularly in certain parts of The Witcher story and saga. But yeah, it's one of those things where I just feel like I care about everybody. Like he has a unique ability to find the humanity in these different characters and to contextualize what's happening in the world through people who we have no reason to care about. And he makes us care about Cahir, about the Nilfgaardians, about the Scoia'tael through Sherwed, and humanizes these complex situations because he has the ability to show all of these different points of view. And this chapter does an excellent job of that. The following chapter, chapter 5, again, excellent example of that in his writing. It certainly conveys the chaos of Thanedd as we bounce around through different people and hear different accounts of what has happened while we're with Geralt.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because I think when you see interviews or see like Andrzej talking about like the book versus like what readers got from the book is sometimes like I purposely didn't do that. It's like, well, it purposely happened to all of us. So like it's so interesting that sometimes like what he's trying to get us to like feel, think, or what emote
Experience,
about the
yeah.
book. Yeah. It's just like the opposite happened. And like that's why we love it. And he's just sitting there going,
I have a feeling he sits there and like bangs his head over a lot of things.
Yeah.
He's done a great job with this series.
Amazing.
But yeah, I'm very thankful for it.
I guess my one other point is just that Cahir I like as a character, but I love his name so much. Like Cahir Mor Dyflin Ipkirlak is like a crazy fantasy name.
It's
It's
so
just
good.
like where's the background there? Is that like Welsh or something? Like that's such a bonkers name.
I think it is, or it could be. I do know like the Ap Keliak, it's like the son of Keliak, but yeah, I would assume that it sounds hella Welsh.
Yeah, I mean
Parts of it.
it's so many times it's like they'll pick a crazy name, but it's usually like at one or two, or sometimes it's not crazy at all, like Joffrey instead of Jeffrey, you know what I mean? Or like
Sure.
it just slightly changed, but then you get like freaking Cahir Mor Dyflin Ip Kirlak is just I just love it so much.
Yeah.
Also with Regis, it's the same.
Yeah.
And also with Geralt, the alternative name.
Yeah,
let's say.
the Eric Beauregard, whatever he wanted to call himself. That's his Himbo origin story. Is Vesemir telling him you're a fucking moron? That's a stupid name.
But it's relatable. I imagine him going around saying, "What? You know what is a cool name? This one. I'm really proud of it."
I know. I love that. I love that for him. What a silly character Geralt is. I feel like people forget how silly he is. You all think Geralt is this stoic, like dude, and no, he's kind of an idiot.
Yeah,
But I love him.
I want to play the game more. I kind of started it, The Witcher 3, but like I never like it's just so interesting because every time I talk to people about The Witcher, at least it feels this way.
Yeah.
It feels like it's very much colored from the game. And so I'm really like interested because people will say something and I'm like, as like a book mainly a book enjoyer, sometimes I'm like, it's really not how they are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but Geralt, it's both because in
Yep.
some chapter, in some quotes, it's like, wow, you're a old, wise, really knowledge and composed person. And in the other paragraphs, just like a 5 years old
Yeah.
saying whatever he think about it.
I
So
know. Like what he says to Dijkstra, he's just like, I didn't want to piss in the plants.
yeah, exactly.
Like you're so silly.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, maybe this shows you how dumb I am, but it's really relatable.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like I have this like great, like wise thought, and sometimes you're just like, that was the stupidest thing I could have said ever. Like, you know, and so like it's kind of realistic. Like you're not brilliant all the time.
No.
Well, maybe some people are. I'm
Maybe so.
not.
Nicola's in the corner like, I study neuroscience. I'm brilliant all the time.
Actually, it's the opposite. If I'm around my usual friends that we are all PhDs, so in different virology and plant biology, we think it seems like from the external view we think about, oh, whoa, we are very clever. No, we are some of the stupidest people around, saying the stupidest jokes, but we happen to be PhDs. We happen to like complicated stuff, and we use all our mental capacity on that particular thing, and so all the other rest of the hours of the day are just like stupid things.
Yeah. All the brain cells are working on neuroscience except for the one that takes the night shift.
Yeah, exactly.
He's just lonely in there.
3 brain cells, 2 for the studies, and 1 for all the dumbbells thing. Preparing the lunch and doing the chores. So it has to do everything, and so it's pretty tired. So it's night shift.
I love that. I love it. So as we come to the kind of close of our discussion, this chapter, the Thanid Coup, as you said, it's a massive chapter that has severe consequences for our main characters, Geralt, Ciri, even Yennefer, as well as for the continent as a whole. This is what's going to incite the next Nilfgaardian War. We'll hear about more of that in Chapter 5. What would you guys say are the stakes throughout this chapter and coming out of it? And what themes or conflicts do you believe that this chapter sets up successfully?
For me, like the big one is like Vilgefortz is the first one that pops up, right? I feel like he very much felt like just like another arrogant mage, you know what I mean? Like another like powerful player that's like has his own agenda for Ciri, just like everyone else. And then I really think this chapter sets him up to be like, it's like, oh, this is someone we have to keep a lot closer eye on, you know? Like at first, I think people think maybe like Philippa or Dijkstra or like Vesemir, but it's like, oh God, here's this guy.
And also for a wider view, also the conflict that it's brewing. So from between the Nilfgaard and the Northern Kings. So it's really starting to come into focus the fact that this time they are not united. So it's probably going to end up worse than the last time. They are successfully using the divided timpera, so they are all divided, and so they can be conquered easily. So you have the two main bad guys, let's say, or the two main foe that comes into focus. So as we said, Vilgefortz and the Nilfgaard that starts to appear as actually something to be afraid of.
I think both of those are really great points when we're especially looking at the series as a whole, like Vilgefortz being set up, the Northern Kingdoms. Both of these are really the backdrop of the rest of the series, right? As we're looking at what's happening on the continent, and then as we come back to our main characters and how the things that are happening in the world affect them, and even vice versa because they're so prolific. the other major thing that happens is, of course, we're with Geralt for the majority of the chapter. He is looking for Yennefer from the moment he wakes up, or rather, from the moment he leaves the room through the end. So he has no idea where she is, despite asking every single person along the way, "Where's Yennefer?" We don't know. And then the same thing, he interacts with Ciri minimally here and there, but she's on the run throughout the whole chapter, and by the end has disappeared into Torlara. So one of the huge things that comes out of this chapter is the separation of that main family, right? We had learned from Ciri, especially in chapter 2, that she doesn't want to be separated from Yennefer and Geralt. And that is a huge part of her not wanting to go to school, for example, and a huge reason for her setting off to Hrindam at the end of chapter 2. We know that Geralt is also, he tells Yennefer, I don't want to lose you. And she's like, "But you have me." And he's like, "No, but we're going to wake up in the morning and it's not going to be quite the same." And he's right. And we kind of end up on a note where, despite all of this desire for them to be together and for them to remain a family, they've been separated through the entirety of this chapter without any promise of coming back together again. And that is, I think, one of the biggest outcomes for the Thanid coup, in addition to the laundry list of consequences that happen for the Council of Mages, for Nilfgaard, for Redania, given Vesemir, for example, and the list goes on and on. But as we've said, at length, this is such a major turning point in the series. And yeah, I'm really excited to have had the opportunity to chat about it with both of you.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, for me, it's the end of this chapter is what do I the list of things that I want to keep track of in the back of my head as I keep reading. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's how this injury colors the rest of Geralt's thing is kind of really relatable to me as someone with chronic pain. This becomes important for Geralt's life and how he handles things. And then you get Ciri obviously is just kind of now has to deal with her consequences of her actions kind of by herself now that they're separated, which colors her life in the story completely. And then now, and then Yennefer has a whole, pretty much the whole third party Tisaya view on the mages. That's how she's lived her life for however long she's been kind of
literally thousands of years.
Right. She's been I'm not really a part of this anymore, right? Because they deal with the politics, and now all of a sudden it's here on your shoulders is all of it. And she's
yeah. I can't believe I forgot to mention this on the next episode, but Tissaya's been alive for thousands of years, and Vilgefortz is what breaks her?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to get to that in the next episode. I just completely forgot to mention that. So put a pin in this for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll get around to Tissaya in the next chapter.
Yeah.
But yeah. What about you? Any final thoughts, Nicola?
Well, the consequence of this chapter are 4 more books. So I'm pretty happy that it happens. So I have more to read. And but yeah, they are very important. As I said before, it's a pivot change. So it's the focus of the turning point of everything, because we end up in a totally different situation. So we start with a strong Geralt with top of the game, and we end up with a broken old man who can sort of swing a sword, and Ciri that doesn't want to be abandoned, as she also said to both Geralt and Yennefer in this chapter. She asked not to leave her alone, and she ended up alone. So it's a new major challenge for her, and Yennefer disappears. So there is also the brief appearance, and then we don't know what is happening. And we found Geralt searching for her, arrived to her chamber, and doesn't know that there is no one. So we end up in a completely new situation. It's a complete opposite between the third chapter and the fifth chapter and the rest of the books. They're completely different after this point, so it's pretty massive.
That's a perfect summation of the importance of Chapter 4. It is a complete flip of the status quo, not just for our individual characters, as you kind of went down the list and showed us, but for what we know of the Northern Kingdoms in Nilfgaard, their alliances, the status of the kings and mages throughout the continent, and everything is inverted. So yeah, what an important chapter to read, and again, such a joy to share it with both of you, and you both have been delightful guests. Yay! First time podcast for both of you. Yay! As we're closing out, that is it for our show today. Nicola, Ruark, thank you so much for joining us for this episode, and thank you to our Hanza for listening. So where can people find you both? And is there anything that our community can help you with, or anything that you would like to share with them?
People can find me in pretty much every social media, more or less. Also, I have a magic profile, so I'm a magician, and sometimes I post my tricks. And hopefully, in the future, I'm starting a Witcher project based on the bestiary and with a bit of scientific look on the creatures of the world of The Witcher. You can find me at Magomufri, so MAGO _MUFRI. And the Witcher project will be named Biologists on the Continent, so it will start, hopefully.
I love both of those things.
Super cool.
So excited to check out your magic. And yes, keep us posted on your bestiary project.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it sounds super fun. Yeah, for me, I mean, I'm on most of the socials, mostly Instagram, just Ruark Michaels, and then Discord, you can find me. Also, I'm kind of working on starting my own meadery, so I make honey wine. So keep an eye coming here soon. The Gray Bear Meadery, Gray with an E. Check out that. There should be stuff coming soon. We're working on our liquor license right now, so that'll be exciting. And then also if I can plug my partner's business, they're a jeweler and silversmith, and they make a lot of like fantasy and nature inspired jewelry. So if you're interested in any of that kind of stuff, definitely check them out. K Johnson Jewelry. I think the Hanza community here would definitely like some mead and some cool jewelry, so definitely check that out. Hit me up about anything fantasy related for sure. I'm always happy to chat.
Well, that's so exciting to hear. I'm so excited about both of your projects. Please keep us posted on your magic, your meadery, and the bestiary as well. Such a joy, again, to meet you both and to have you both on the show. Next episode, join us as we continue our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Time of Contempt with Chapter 5.
Woo!
Yay! My hands are hella sweaty. Why are they sticking like that?
Humidity, man. New York, that's why I left the East Coast.
Thanks for joining us at The Breakfast Table. For show notes, transcripts of each episode, and a complete list of our social platforms and listening services, head over to breakfastandbeauclair.com. Breakfast and Beauclair is created by Alyssa from GoodMorhen. It's hosted by Alyssa with the tanks, which is song music by Lars Mischerflex. The show is edited by Alyssa with music by Alex Berner. Breakfast and Beauclair is produced by Alyssa in New York City with Katie the Redheaded of Toussaint, Jacob B. Hidden at the Edge of the World, Sharon from Bangor, Glamry, the Great Rose, Connor's Cat, Libby John of Verblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, James Carson III, Miriam Tamari, and Softy. Special thanks to Nicola and Ruark for joining us for this episode, and our international Hanza for their support.